Okay, so thank you everybody for being here. As I was saying before, my name is Florencia. I'm head of communications in NAVE, which is a residency venue located in Santiago de Chile. And before we begin, I just really want to thank everybody for being here, and I'm just so delighted and so thankful of OpenScape Network just to open up the possibility to be discussing about strategies of communications. After thanking to the OpenScape Network that just opened the possibility to be speaking about these things, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about NAVE and how this idea came up. NAVE is a venue residency located in Santiago de Chile, as I was saying. It is located in a very special neighborhood, which is Yungay neighborhood. This is actually the oldest neighborhood in the Chilean Republic as we know it today. And therefore, we're very connected towards our public, towards the community that surrounds us. And because of that, we have always seen or faced with the challenge of opening up to those communities and connect with those communities. We're popularly known for being one of the first residency venues located in Latin America that dedicates exclusively or almost entirely to living arts. We're right now moving towards more interdisciplinary arts, but we have been dedicated to this since 2015. And so therefore, we have always, ever since, tried to connect with the communities around us, and that is the community of our neighborhood, the community, the artistic community in general, the living arts community in Chile, and people in general. So because we face these challenges, we came up with the idea of really wanted to know how other cultural institutions around the world deal with this kind of challenges. So this is how this idea came up, and OpenScape Network arranged these meetings and these panels so we can get to know how other cultural institutions face with these challenges. Is it relevant or not for other cultural institutions? Is it important according to your social and political context, or maybe not? Do you connect with a specific community, or maybe not that much? So we just wanted to get to know. So just thank you very much for being here and to participate in these panels. Please, at the end of these meetings, let's all stay in touch so we can keep widening our great international network about residency venues in general.
Thank you, Florencia. So the first panel is going to be concentrated mainly on how we communicate and how we promote residency programs within the profession among artists to other curators or presenters. For this first panel, we have 3 residencies that I'm going to present. The first one is Chimachita. Located in the Swiss mountains, Chimachita is a multidisciplinary place of retreat, research, exchange, and development. It is the initiative of a small group of passionate individuals offering both supported and on-demand residency periods for up to 15 persons at a time. Lea Loeb is a theater dramaturg and curator, part of the curatorial team of the Zürcher Theaterspektakel. She co-initiated Chimachita to foster the independent art scene. So Lea, hi. Next, we are going to speak with the Saison Foundation. The Saison Foundation was established in 1987 to support contemporary Japanese performing arts through grants and through the use of its facilities in Tokyo. The residency programs began in 2011 to stimulate bilateral exchanges with overseas institutions and to host foreign artists and art managers in their research in Japan. Inamura is program director at the Saison Foundation and also contributes regularly on cultural policy and institutions. Hi, Taro.
Hello. Thank you.
Next, we have Pro Helvetia Shanghai. which promotes artistic and cultural exchanges between Switzerland and China by developing and nurturing long-term partnerships between event organizers and artists in both countries. They encourage this dialogue through co-productions, knowledge exchange, and residencies. Lucy Liu has extensive management experience in international cultural exchanges and has been the head of Pro Helvetia Shanghai since August 2018. Hi, Lucy. So I will start with a question to Lucy. You are the head of Pro Helvetia Shanghai Liaison Office. You work both on sending Chinese artists in Switzerland and on receiving Swiss artists in China. What strategies have you developed to reach out to the artists and to the institutions with which you'd like to partner in China?
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So for us, we are actually not a residency venue, but we work with residency venues both in Switzerland and in China to host artists from the other country. So our policy is that, so in terms of artists, we are actually not short of applicants every year because, you know, the opportunities in China for artists to be in residency overseas is very limited. So every year we will get more than 100 applications for just 4 to 5 seats in Switzerland. But so for us, the strategy is not to reach as many artists as possible, but to actually diversify the artists we select. So in the beginning, we have lots of visual art applications. I think partially because we work a lot on visual art projects and partially because visual art is just like the biggest, most booming art discipline in China. So we have lots of applications from that sector, but we develop a format to reach out to other sectors that would otherwise have less opportunities to be exposed to the residency opportunity. So we work with partners in other sectors. For example, performing art. We actually work with iPanda, who is also part of OpenScape, to promote the residency opportunity among performing artists. We organize like an end of year networking event to promote the residency, to have dialogues between Chinese and Swiss artists, and also have performances, and also of course with drinks and food. So it was a nice occasion always, and yeah, through this way it actually worked quite well. We got immediately lots of application from performing art, and we adapted this format to other art forms and also to other areas of China where artists, we see that there are not so many artists applying from that region. So that's, yeah, basically our strategy for artists. Partnership wise, we don't really have a strategy to reach out, but we do have a strategy in terms of what kind of in terms of what kind of partners we want to work with. We look for partners that whose interest is mutually relevant to both, you know, Chinese and Swiss art world, and we look for partners who are trying to establish real connections rather than, we want to avoid, you know, exploitation on the artistic level of artists. So yes, basically that's what our strategy. Thank you.
Taro Inamura, you are the head of residency programs of the Saison Foundation, which is a grant foundation situated in the east part of Tokyo. In this framework, networking and matchmaking is also one of the most important aspects of the activities that take place in your residency. Can you tell us more about how you connect resident artists and researchers to local peers or institutions?
Yes, okay. Hello everyone. So thank you for like having me here today. I also like to say thank you also for your very important explanation and question. Because the answer to this question has to do with why we started our residency. We are grant-making foundation and mainly support Japanese artists, and we run grants that support international collaboration. However, before starting our residency program, we had a big question: where Japanese artists can meet with international artists and arts manager. So that's why we started the residency program to aim to create a meeting place for Japanese artists and international artists. So we usually host the artist talk after they arrive in Japan so that we can introduce overseas artists to Japanese artists and local producer, maybe arts manager. And then, so the artist, we will like ask artists to introduce their artistic activity and give a presentation on the purpose of their visit to Japan and what kind of research they would like to do. So we also like to set up the individual meeting to connect with those who cannot come to the artist talk. Also like an academician who are not like involved in the performing arts. Maybe like I should say like example. For example, like when we had a like artist who wanted to research about the no in terms of dramaturgy, we set up the meeting with like a no master and actor and the researcher. And so maybe I should like, yeah, I should add like a little bit things. So because like, in terms of the selection of the artists, so we do not like select who are simply interested in Japanese culture and art. And we try to like artists who bring a new like insight or perspective on our culture and art. So we often like get application for like those who like to like had an opportunity to get like Buto training. But I think so as maybe you can guess, so we would not like attempt to select such artists.
Since we're always in the topic of trying to also reach to people who are not artists necessarily, I would like to ask a question to Lea Loeb. So you are one of the members of the association that is responsible for the Cimacita residency situated in Ticino. You describe it as self-organized, independent space in the Swiss Alps, working with very little financial means. Can you tell us about how the landscape in which you're situated and your desire for people to encounter each other have helped in communicating your presence as a residency?
Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for the invitation to be here as a very small player, I would guess, in this pond, maybe the smallest. It's great to be here and to share some ideas. So yes, maybe I start with the location, which is actually quite particular. Cimacita is a residency place that is part of an industrial, former industrial building. It was once a chocolate factory, and it's situated in the midst of the Swiss Alps, actually in the Italian-speaking part of Switzerland. It is very particular because it's really surrounded by nature. It lies in a valley that is non-touristic at all. So it's very remote, but somehow accessible by public transport, which is, sometimes happens in Switzerland. That doesn't happen in other places. And it's quite particular in the sense of being like in a special environment that is an industrial building, not maybe in the not most modern standards, but that this gives a lot of freedom actually to our residents. So this is to start from the location, because I think it's very low. It's very central. The location is very central to what we can offer. So yes, what we hear a lot is that residents that spend time in Chinachita actually talk a lot about the connection they have with nature. So it's this whole idea about retreating, like leaving the urban centers and going somewhere remote to work in nature. It's not suitable maybe for all kinds of phases of a project. We tend to have projects on site that are in early stages, in conceptual stages. They do a lot of writing work, a lot of thinking, brainstorming, exchanging, and actually they do a lot of work outdoors. Especially in the post-pandemic world, this is a feedback that we get very often, that more projects than before ask for outdoor spaces to work, especially when they are in an early phase of the project. And so you actually put a lot of questions in that one question. But so yeah, I would say Chinachita is a very good place for people to retreat and to experiment. Also, the fact that we are not that well equipped in the sense of rehearsal rooms and or technical means. This gives, on the other hand, a big opportunity to people to experiment. So what we hear a lot as a feedback is that our residents, they love the opportunity to leave traces, to leave things behind, to propose things, to impose their own activity somehow on the site, to leave stuff there, to change the space and to invite others to do so with them. Chinachita is not only a place for retreat, but also a place for meeting other people and other projects, because normally we have like several projects there at the same time. And also there, actually, the limitation in standard is a plus. So we have, for example, one kitchen, and the residents on site have to deal themselves on how to use this kitchen. This sounds very banal. It's like not really something we thought about when we first started, but it's actually the meeting point where the encounter happens. So people start to exchange and to organize themselves around the kitchen, and this is where conversation starts. And then yeah, when they spend maybe a week together on site, they get to know each other more intimately and they start to interact, and we actually get a lot of feedback of people working together after having met at Chinachita. Did I answer all of your questions? I'm not sure now.
Yes, thank you very much. I have another question for you. So we understand that you are very successful in attracting artists to apply to your annual residency programs or even to rent the venue. But you told us that when preparing that non-artists are less likely to apply. Could you tell us about the strategy to draw practitioners from outside that spectrum, for example, activists?
Yes, thank you very much for that question. I think that's very crucial for our project. First, maybe I should mention that we have two different models of residencies. So we have on-demand residencies, which is basically a renting model. And then we have subsidized residencies. And also in the subsidized residencies, we have two different models. So on the one hand, we do every year an open call for residencies. It's a thematical call that we send out and spread as good as we can also into different disciplines. And we get actually a lot of answers, a lot of applications, international applications, a lot of applications also from Switzerland, from the different language regions and also different disciplines. But we also learned that all the applications we get come from arts, from the art scene, on the one or the other hand. And this is, so that's what we have learned so far, because it's a common practice for artists to apply for residencies. It's not that much of a common practice in other circles. So we are, and we understand ourselves as interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary project, and we believe that art and other disciplines that also deal with social, political issues should exchange more often. And this is why we started to try different strategies to also attract other projects to spend time at Chimachita. So what we do now is actually we have this invite model. Besides the possibility of the open call and the application, we approach actively projects that we think deserve to have a place to retreat and to work on their projects and their ideas. Especially we do so with activist projects. But we learned that this is really not happening by itself. It's something we have to actively work on.
Taro, you also have been supporting residencies for non-artists, such as researchers, curators, and art managers. Could you please tell us how your work is different when preparing residencies with artists and non-artists in terms of partnerships or matchmaking?
Actually, artists do not necessarily want to meet artists in the same field. But an arts manager wants to know the state of the performing arts in Japan. So, for example, like a theater producer or festival director wants to meet a theater artist. So that's like one of the a difference. So they also want to meet like a festival director. I mean, arts manager would like to meet a festival director and producer, colleagues. And sometimes they want to meet a policy maker who supports the scene as well as the artist. So actually, during the international festival and the market, such as Kyoto Experiment and YPAN, so many foreign a festival director and producer come to Japan. But we consider our residency program for arts manager to be different. That is because it's more like a business trip, so you can only stay for 7, maybe 1 week or 10 days at the most. You also have to do your best to see the works being performed at a festival and market as much as possible. So basically they are very busy to watching the pieces and work. However, in a month stay in Japan allows you not only to meet artists, but also to experience a Japanese culture and also a lifestyle. So you may see a scene of hot spring and a public bathhouse in the works created by Japanese artists. So that is something common in Japanese. But for the people from the overseas, that is something they often don't understand, and then until they experience it. So for this reason, we encourage our visiting fellow, arts manager, not only to meet artists, but also we encourage experience Japanese culture and lifestyle. So maybe I would say the reason for this is for residency. It's not just in something to support work, but also I think supporting the life experience, I think.
Thank you very much, Taro. Lucy, you two are dealing with two very different communities. For Taro, it is artists and non-artists. In your case, it is about this movement between Switzerland and China, which offer very different conditions and expectations. Do you coach artists before they go to before they come to Switzerland or before they go to China?
We do not, but we actually now feel more and more that we don't need to coach them, but we think it would be better to have maybe an online meeting between the artist and the coach before they go, to for us to better know the artist's needs, and also for them to better know, what is possible here, what is relevant, what can be realized or what cannot be realized here. We feel that's quite important before they come, because like for artists who are not familiar with the context, local context, it would be like some of their expectations might not be met, you know, and if they find out when they come, that would be not very ideal. So that's one thing. Then on the logistic level, we also prepared something like for them, like a handbook for them to know, you know, what the place you are going would be like, just very general information. So yes, we don't do that, but we are starting to do that.
Have you had an example of someone coming to China, for example, and finding conditions or a place that doesn't meet his or her expectations?
Right. I think on the yes, I think it's interesting, you know, although you know that you come to the country and you don't speak the language, it would be difficult, but still, you know, when you actually come and, you know, feel it, it's kind of a shock. But of course, I think a communication beforehand doesn't solve the problem. But I think an example we had was that there was an artist who wants to research on the duty-free, not shops, you know, those trade zones like in China. It's a very specific areas in Shanghai, and she wants to do film shooting in those places. Now, I think that was quite some years ago. And so I think there was no communication beforehand whatsoever. But then when she came and when she wanted to do that, she found out, and we also found out that it's not possible. It's an area that you cannot just go and shoot. And there are security people like to stop doing that. And we have also tried to speak to the local authority for a permission for her shooting, and it was also not possible. So, but then her whole proposal, her whole idea on, like, a large part of her idea of working in China is to focus on that part. And when it becomes not possible, of course, she chose other ways to, you know, study other things about the trade zones in China, but then like a large part is missing. So yes, that's an example. And then I think if a communication was carried out beforehand, maybe she could alter, you know, what she wanted to do, or you know, we can brainstorm for some other options.
You mentioned this handbook that you have also prepared. Is this open to be consulted prior to applications?
Yes, we actually, there is like a handbook with, you know, all those information, like, you know, ambulance number, those kind of things. I think that is, we send to artists after they got the opportunity. But we do we produced a handbook of just to, like, for residency institutions in China. We have a handbook to introduce them, like we interviewed them and made this handbook to let Swiss artists know what are residency venues like here, what is possible here, what can they expect if they apply for residency in China and got the opportunity. And that's but then, you know, the changes of Chinese residency venues is very quick. So many of the information is already changed, but I think it still gives a very good picture of what is possible. What can you expect when you come to residency in China? So it's still on our website and downloadable like anytime.
I would like to ask a question to Florencia. Establishing connections and making yourself visible as a residency is also one of your challenges. How do you achieve that? How do you situate yourself within the performing arts context of Santiago de Chile and beyond?
Well, actually, I believe that other cultural institutions play like more than a fundamental role within our connections, but we are mostly covered in that part. I mean, we definitely have like great connections with other institutions in Santiago de Chile, but also northward and southward. We're very focused on having those connections, bondings, and alliances, and somehow relationships. And lately we have also like widened a little bit our range, and we have been moving towards the south of the world. So we've been connecting more with India and South Africa and like other kind of, just navigations and not like the usual ones, because we're trying to have a more, just to incorporate a more of a decolonial perspective within our curatorial lens. So that has been very, very important to a little bit of open up our connections. But I believe our challenges are not in that matter, are mostly like, how do we position our project in Santiago de Chile, but not towards the artistic community, but towards other people in general? How do we explain what we do? What's a residency? What's living arts in general? Why do we have free workshops or free labs? How do we sustain ourselves in terms of economic issues? How do we apply to public fundings? Why do we do it? And on that matter, on that field, we really have to constantly be showing and somehow proving that we're worth, or that we're worthy of that aid or economic public funding, right? So I believe our challenges are in that area, and also how do we position our projects in press in general and public opinion, because we have to be constantly explaining what we do. So I believe our challenges regarding communications and regarding strategies are more in that area than establishing connections. I believe we're very good at establishing connections. We have like great open calls results. I mean, we have had great applicants, great projects. We have received great projects, but our issues are more in that area of how do we explain what we do. Why is it important that artists and the artist community in general actually can have a space or a venue to investigate, to make research, to create? Why the creation processes are important within, the artistic investigation or research. So I believe our challenges are more in that area.
Mm-hmm. And can you tell us a little bit? Maybe we can already talk about it before starting the second panel. Can you tell us a little bit how do you achieve that? How have you been going about explaining what you're doing and presenting yourself to the community until now? And what challenges has it presented until now?
Yeah. I believe one important thing is to identify the differences between communities. Like one thing is press, which is probably not a community, right? One thing is artists, and another thing is our neighborhood in general, and another thing is the public contest, the funding contest we apply to. And the other thing is people in general that we expect to come to our performances, to our free workshops in general, etc. We currently offer, because on the contrary of Simachita, for example, as Leah was explaining, that they have paid residencies, and that's one of their mottos. We do not have paid residencies. Our residencies are totally free of charge, but we receive them through applications, through our open calls. And we kind of ask the artists to give something in return to the community, not to us, but towards the community. And because of that, we have had a lot of different workshops that have been directed to different communities, such as the elders, children, students, deaf people, etc. We have had like artists in general that have dedicated a lot working in those fields. And we have identified those communities to learn specific strategies to communicate with them. For example, for our free workshops for the eldest in general, we have communicated through WhatsApp, through flyers, physical flyers. We have chosen not digital platforms such as Instagram, like to be the fort or to be the strong part of those communications. but more to be focused, just going around in the neighborhood and knocking doors and, just having a little chat with our neighbors of the corner that has this, just a small shop or small market. And we've been hanging there and talking and speaking and inviting them to be part of our activities and so on. And we have probably contacted as well, another institutions that dedicate to work with older people, with the elders in general. So we really work like specifically. And when we have performances, which is kind of the moment into which we need more press, we just are very insistent. I believe that's very crucial. That's the key. We try to sell a little bit. It's inevitable. We try to just really, just assure the other person that it's going to be a great performance and that we will be having like great artists and we also have a lot of free activities. So that definitely, motivate a lot of people to come to join those activities. And well, I believe, it's human teams are just crucial for what we do. Like the communications team of NAVE is so great. We're 3 people and we work a lot in order to achieve, to thrive, to get people to come to our performances and activities. But I believe one important strategy is, as I was saying before, to identify the community. What are the needs of that community? What do we know about that community? It's different when we're working with children or school students or professional artists and so on.
Thank you so much. It's super interesting, and maybe we'll have time to discuss it even in the second panel. Now I would like to give the floor to all of you for questions and answers. We have about 15 minutes for that. Does anyone have any questions?
I actually have a question. I'm sorry I speak that much, but I have a question for Leah, actually, because I know that you're located, and I know that this is more of the second panel, but just if you can tell us briefly if you connect or not with the neighborhood or the village around you, because you're located like in a very specific area and zone. So I was wondering if you have any kind of connections within that territory.
Thank you for the question. That's actually a good one and not easy to answer. So for the people here knowing Switzerland, so Switzerland has different language regions, and one of those is the Italian-speaking language region, and it has about 350,000 inhabitants. So it's super small. I mean, we're speaking of a country that has in total 8 million inhabitants, right? So very, very, very tiny country. And so this region in the Alps is not only remote because of being in the Alps, but also remote in the sense of being part of the Italian-speaking region of the country. I say this because it's the smallest language community. Well, almost. We even have a 4th language, but I won't go into detail on that in this round. But it's the smallest community language-wise in Switzerland. This means that there's also less means for arts and culture in the Italian-speaking region of the country. So we are like double remote, right? We are remote in the sense of being the less funded region, language region in the country, and also remote because being in the Alps. Being in the Alps, also being in a non-touristic area. So it has been very difficult actually to get in touch with people, with the direct neighbors in the villages surrounding the factory, because the factory, the industrial site, is actually between two beautiful villages, which there's a lot of, I mean, there's people living there, and there's some holiday apartments, but it's like the people who live there mainly work in agriculture. It's still like very rural. It's a very rural area. And no, it has not been easy to get in touch, I have to admit, with people around. So we could establish in the like I arrived there with the first project 2015, and Cimacità is running since 2019. So in the years since we started, we have had the chance to engage with some people from the villages, but it's really, it has been quite tough. So there's language barriers. Most of the people coming to Cimacità speak or German or French or English, I have to say. So less of them speak Italian. So there is a language barrier. And there's also this barrier of people coming from the contemporary art scene and then this super rural, remote area on the Alps, right? So it's a lot of things. You have a lot of barriers you have to cross. So we started a lot in the beginning to engage with these people, to invite maybe for a dinner, to do showing. So there's actually quite a bit of our residents who in the end of their stay want to do a small showing. We always try to make this possible as far as we can with the little means we have, but normally we make it possible and we try to help them promote. Maybe we give them some money to prepare some food. If they invite people to stay that come from further away, they can stay overnight, etc. So we try to do the best to also give this sensation of an open house, but it's difficult to get neighbors to come. Yeah, it's very difficult. Then on the other hand, we have been reaching out more and more to the urban centers of the Italian-speaking region of the country, and this has been more successful. So by now, I would say that there's more and more people knowing us in Lugano, for example, or in Locarno, or in Chiasso, which are like the bigger cities in the region. And they're, yeah, I think we are kind of on their radar by now, but it has been quite a bit of work. So yeah, that's what I can tell. So this thing of being in a non-urban area, being remote, is very beautiful in the sense of working extremely well for the people, in the sense of concentrating, focusing, like diving into nature and into this site. But it's not easy to connect with the surrounding communities.
May I also add something on what you just said, Lea, about financial possibilities? In fact, in Switzerland, most residencies that are situated either on the German part or the French part of Switzerland, they usually receive funding either from the town or from the canton, sometimes from both of them. In Ticino, there is practically no financial help from the government. So having a residency in Ticino is something of a very heroic activity to undertake. Yeah.
So also we don't get money from Ticino. So Ticino is actually that's the name of the region, right? And we don't get money from Ticino. We only got once now support from Ticino. All the rest of the money we get is from funding organizations that are actually based in German-speaking Switzerland. That's also truth. It's really a mirror of how money is structured and shared within the different regions of the country.
Exactly. I'll take another question.
Okay, if no one else has a question, I still have questions. Is that okay? Take over. Okay. I wanted to ask something to Taro, because you mentioned, I believe we kind of have a similar situation regarding like your foundation, but at the same time you apply to public financial aid. So I was wondering, like what means and platforms in terms of communication do you use? I mean, I know you have a website, but do you have Instagram? Do you have, just Facebook, Twitter, etc.? How do you manage to work with those platforms and what do you believe are your communication strategies, and how many people integrate maybe your communications team? So it's regarding communications.
Yeah, thank you very much for your question. So actually, yeah, we get like a funding from the government as well. And but you know, as you know, so we are like a foundation. We have a like small fund. So we mix the money from the like a government and from us. And in terms of the communication, we have like a website, and also like we have like a newsletter, and like we use like a Twitter and a Facebook. And but yeah, we are like still like in the process of like developing the communication. So recently, so we'd like to like try to like make a small like film, and especially like we did like online residency program during the COVID. So because like, it's really difficult to tell the like people so what happened in the online residency program. So that's why like we make like a 20 minutes like video and talking about what is the online residency is. So maybe I can like share the link of the video. But yeah, we're still like in the process of the developing for communication. So I will like attach the link.
Thank you, Taro. Jennifer McCall has a question.
Hey, hello, everybody. I'm Jennifer McCall. Thanks, Florencia. She's my co-worker at Communications. I direct NAVE in Chile. And I was wondering, I mean, to the panelists, but also a kind of question for anybody that would like to talk about this, because I believe we have a bit of a problem in terms of being measured to get the fundings we need. So there is like a correlation between how we communicate things for people to come to NAVE, but also how we measure that to be able to apply for more fundings. And then as we do not work as a full theater open every weekend, you know, with different pieces, but more as a residency place, we have a lot of artists. I mean, I think someone opened. We have a lot of artists, like over 1,000 artists that have come to NAVE to create the processes and then go out to the world and that get seen somewhere else, you know? So then our measurements are very different from other places that can show work constantly. And that it's a problem for us because then when they ask us how many people went to NAVE to see pieces, it's very little, you know? And then, so we need to constantly be able to say what we do, how we do it, and why we have those numbers, and why those numbers actually matter, you know, to the community. I don't know if any of the panelists here have similar issues, or any other people, you know, that have to deal with that kind of things, how to measure what you do to be able to get more fundings.
Well, I think we do, but since we come from a very similar context, because we're both in Chile and in Santiago, I think it's maybe not that big of a contrast for us to get an idea. But yeah, of course, we deal with the same thing, and we always talk about those numbers in the sense that we have to bring more people in, but also we would love for people to understand that we're not only bringing more people, but we're bringing back the same people that came that first time. So, you know, like that, those things usually are not necessarily taken into account when it comes to the measurements of what you've been doing. They just look at the big main number and, oh, okay, you brought like 100,000 people, 100 people to this event. But we are not only bringing 100 people to event, we're bringing the same 100 people that we brought to the last event. And that is also important because those people are counting on us for their activities. They come back to us, they feel that they belong in this place. And that measurement is also a bit complex. I don't know if that makes any sense to any of you guys, but we're similar to NAVE in the sense that we don't have shows every weekend. We don't have that sort of income or I guess entry of people. So measuring our audiences and how we reach back to them, it's as tricky for us as it is for them.
Well, thank you very much. Maybe we end here the first panel, and we'll start with the second panel in 5 minutes.